on television. I'm sure you understand that. I did that interview earlier with Gerard Hayes from the Health Services Union, the number of violent incidences that happen in hospitals and putting nurses and even wardsmen, security guards at risk. Well, machete attack in Victoria, spike in home invasions. We see it on television time and time again. Puts violent crime and the use of weapons into the public spotlight well and truly. Well, they may have fueled concerns about our streets becoming completely unsafe or more dangerous. National data tells a different story. Overall, violent crime and weapon use has been declining over the past decade, believe it or not. Well, Upper House MP David Limbrick has put forward calls for an overhaul of the self-defence laws to give residents some peace of mind, not to mention in a hospital. Well, former police officer and criminologist Associate Professor Terry Goldsworthy tracks these trends, and very happy to say that he joins me on the line now. G'day, Terry.
Yeah, morning, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, good. And they do look shocking on television, and as we know, the media like to play them up. But based on the broader, let's say, crime data, are we seeing an actual increase in violent crime?
Look, on the broad data, no, we're not. And the story may vary from state to state. But if we have a look at, I guess, three sets of data that's national, and one is the homicide rate. We know that that's declined dramatically over the last 30 years or so.
Yep.
In terms of robberies and physical assaults, the amounts reported to police have declined. But we can also look at what we call victim surveys, and they capture offences that may be unreported to police.
Right.
And those surveys show that the rate of physical assault has declined from 2.3 to 1.7% per 100,000 of population. And for robberies, it's almost halved from 0.4% to 0.2%.
Yeah, right. So, and you see the pictures on television, don't you, Terry? These, especially the young men in Victoria, mostly wearing their hoodies and their masks with weapons in their hands, and it's a frightening sight. And Gerard's interview about violent crime, and it is crime in the hospital that they're facing, but research shows violent crime, as you say, is trending down. But there's still that public fear. I mean, how do you get to the public that they're going to say, "Oh, yeah, trending down, yeah, not at my place"? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. We know from crime data, we had a look at New South Wales, etc., and those type of violent offences are decreasing as national data indicates. But it's interesting, what we are seeing, though, is increases in the number of weapons that people are carrying in public. So both Queensland showed an increase in possession of weapons, not firearms-specific possession charges, interestingly, so probably more likely knives and the likes. And New South Wales also had an increase in recent years in terms of custody of knives in public places. So there is an increase in police detecting those kind of weapons. That could be due to a number of things. More people are carrying them, or could be due to the police being more proactive in looking for those weapons. But certainly, I think, the fact social media is so prevalent now in our society, we can all record and capture events as they occur. So, instead of having one cameraman out there for the news show, you've now got a whole population. So,
that's right, yeah.
We're more exposed.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point you make, Terry. Everyone's got a mobile phone and they'll film it. And, I think the television stations even attract that. They say, well, if you've got any vision, please send it in and we'll run it. And you see it on television news programs every night. So that's probably a tad alarmist, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, that's what media is about. It's about the clickbait to get people in there, and you don't sell news stories at night by running boring stories. No. So crime always features, and it's usually the first story to run because it's salacious. It's something that gets people concerned. It hooks them emotionally, and they're all the kind of imperatives that good news stories have to some degree in terms of getting a good viewing audience. So
that's right.
We are kind of trapped by that dilemma, I guess.
Yeah, and look, we are seeing, major crackdowns, and that's like Jack's Law, which is going international, which is terrific. And I've seen myself when I was coming in to work at another radio station at Central. I did see for a while there, and I think it was a crackdown, a lot of police, patting down young people who just hang around the train stations, and, that's the crackdown on knives and sharp weapons. So I think people, that's the government saying, well, we are doing something about it. But do they remain that prevalent, or are we just seeing what we're seeing on television, as we say?
Look, I mean, the perception is that, crime is worse. We think crime is worse. It's not. What we're seeing is, as you said, police actions out there, which is good. I mean, Some people have said Jack's Law is not overly effective. Myself, I think it's a good initiative. I mean, any weapon that's taken off the street is a benefit to the public. So, it has to have other aspects to it, such as education of young people. And we are talking mostly about young people in terms of knives.
We are,
carriage of them.
Yeah.
But, I think those operations are good for the public. They're reassuring. We want to see our police out there being active in terms of crime deterrence.
Yeah.
So it's a deterrence aspect as well as the enforcement aspect, and those things are good for the public to see because they will counter those perceptions that we have that crime may be out of control, when in reality we know in Australia violent crime is declining.
Yeah, right. Now, this proposal by the MP, David Limbrick, to give, residents peace of mind and upgrading or overhauling the self-defence laws. Terry, aren't you on a bit of a slippery slope when you start suggesting things like that as to what people can do to defend themselves? Aren't you running the risk of running down the American path? And surely we don't want that, do we?
Well, yeah, it is. You need to see the fine detail what it's proposing. I mean, the issue is, generally in self-defence we talk about it being proportionate and it has to be timely. The threat has to be present then and there. So if we're going to start stepping outside of that and just say, well, if someone steps into your house, you're entitled to use whatever force you want, then that does become problematic, especially when you're talking about a number of offences being committed by youth. I guess, the caveat to that is that we have had in Queensland youth offenders murder people in their houses.
That's right.
You need to respond to the threat. And, I mean, it is difficult. If you get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's 2 dark shadows in your lounge room.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's hard to make a risk assessment as to, are they armed with a knife? Are they armed with anything else? Are they unarmed? And what do I do with them? So it's a problematic area. I mean, people, should be able to feel safe in their own homes. How far we allow them to use force is something we need to be very careful of.
Yeah, very careful indeed. Good to talk to you, Terry. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, Tim.
That's Associate Professor Terry Goldsworthy, a former copper himself. And yes, I mean, the stats show, and, sometimes people say, oh, yeah, the stats, they're rubbery figures. Well, they are the stats, and he's been doing that for a long time, Terry. And they're showing trending down. But we're seeing on television, young blokes in their hoodies with a knife or a machete in their hand, and it's deeply confronting. So how far do you, it's an interesting question, go down the path of self-defence? Well, I can tell you, my wife grew up in South Africa, and everyone had a gun there. And the laws are very different there. And she was actually taught by, I think, a dad or someone on how to use it. Never did. And that's, a lot of violent crime back then in South Africa, that's for sure. So do you head down that path? Difficult one, very difficult. But reason we have Terry on is to sort of allay the myth that violent crime is out of control, and it's actually not.